Hi, I'm Beatrice Seguin, PhD. What used to be that time of the month is now this time of the month. Welcome to our community, a curated space for everyone going through perimenopause and menopause. A place where we can find support, good laughs, great tips on products, and lots of education on health. There's beauty in aging. Whatever beautiful means to you, this time of the month will help you find it and live it. The content expressed in this time of the month is not intended to be a substitute for medical advice. The views and opinions expressed on this show are those of the speakers. So now we're going to move into a little bit more invasive because I'm sure everyone's, that's what you do a lot of your day.
Bread and butter,
It's the bread and butter. And, people are scared. So before we can talk about what we can do, one question from one of my community members is, because you talk about some misconceptions, are there potential bad side effects of Botox? Some people are still scared of that. So let's go there.
I get that question all the time. Overdoing anything can have negative consequences, right? When we inject Botox into somebody, essentially what we are doing is blocking the little receptors in the muscles that get the signal from the brain telling that muscle to contract. Everything in the body has a purpose. It plays a role. It has a responsibility, muscles included, right? So for example, let's say when we treat the crow's feet or these little lines that people tend to get around here, over treatment of the orbicularis oculi muscle, which is the little sphincter muscle that surrounds the eye, is going to have an impact on lymphatic drainage, right? Every time we blink and we wink and we squeeze this muscle, it helps to promote fluid away from that area. And we'll get into, I think, a lot of the stuff that you touched on earlier. We'll talk about that too. But if you are over-treating these muscles and you're abusing these treatments, which people tend to do, right? I'll get people that I'll treat and they'll come a month later and be like, just a touch-up, just a touch-up, just a touch-up, just a touch-up. The way Botox works is like any medication you take. The more often you take this medication, especially if you abuse it, whether it's Advil, Tylenol, antibiotics, the less it's going to work and it's going to lessen its efficacy over time, right? So if a treatment that you used to do every 6 months and then you got a little obsessed with it and you love the results and you want to keep them up all the time, which is normal, it happens. Everybody loves a good thing, right? Just a little more, just a little more, just a little more. You can lose that efficacy. And as you lose that efficacy, you need higher doses, you need more frequent treatments. Essentially what you're doing with Botox in the long period is like the opposite of working out. If that muscle is not able to contract and loses its power and its ability to make that squeeze, and it starts to atrophy and that muscle will shrink. So for aging skin, I wouldn't say people middle age, but I have clients that are treated that they're in their 70s and 80s that have had Botox for decades. Their skin looks much thinner and much poorer quality than somebody that has maintained some muscle mass. Okay. Because the muscle has a place, right? Especially in areas like the forehead and around the neck, in between the eyes. If you thin out that muscle completely and you totally atrophy it and there's no evidence of muscle mass, it can make the skin look even thinner than it would be normally.
So where's the balance? So that's why you follow the recommended frequency
the regimen
or dosage?
Absolutely. At minimum, it's 12 weeks in between Botox treatments. I personally do it maybe twice a year because I don't mind if a few wrinkles come back in. I like to see that my muscle comes back to a certain strength because I know after my treatment, a week or two in, my skin will iron itself out. And I keep that sort of natural ability going. Some people hate it, right? It's aesthetics over everything, the way I look above all, which of course to each their own. But I would say at minimum, give it 3-4 months in between treatments.
So if a person is on the fence, but they think they might want to try something, what would be the one thing you would start with?
Aside
you can use my
skincare,
face if you want.
Aside from skincare?
Yeah, we're in the domain of injectables right now.
I think Botox, everybody would benefit from. I think even if they don't have lines and wrinkles yet, so there's two ways we look at it, right? There's what we call static lines and dynamic lines. So a lot of people will come to me and they'll raise their eyebrows and they'll go, look at all the lines in my forehead. Or they'll frown really tight and they'll say, look at all that furling and that frowning and I don't want to do that anymore. And then they relax and they let it go and there's nothing there. right? So those would be dynamic lines. When you're making expression and you're making facial movements, we all have lines. That's what the skin is meant to do. It creases with the way that we move our face, and then it relaxes when we're not making expressions. Now, some people have stronger muscles than others. Genetically, their muscles are shaped differently, formed differently. Like a forehead, somebody will go from hairline to hairline, from eyebrow to the top of their hair. Some people will have a few little lines, right? But the big thing I would say is everybody would benefit from Botox, if nothing, preventatively. And you hear all this cute stuff on Instagram and social media, like baby Botox and all that. It doesn't mean anything.
I don't even know what that is.
That's what I mean. Like it's just a dosage. Your dosage and my dosage are completely different. We have different face structures, different face shapes.
Yeah.
Our muscles are different sizes, different strengths. I would probably, also I'm a male, gender plays a big factor in that too. Huge factor. Like my muscles would be way more bulky, and the threshold that they would need for the dosage would be much higher to do the same thing.
Yeah.
If you have static lines, it's when you relax that forehead and the lines stay in.
Okay.
Those are harder to treat, right? You can have mild, moderate, severe ones. The deeper they are, the more Botox you're gonna need. And maybe if you've gone too long and decided too late to get some Botox done, they might be too far gone.
So what's a, relatively speaking, because we don't push this on anyone, but what would be a recommended age to start a regimen? Let's call it a regimen, right?
Age would be tough, because I've seen 20-year-olds with moderate lines, which is really weird, right? Yeah. I've seen 35-year-olds with incredible skin that have never had Botox. I would say if at rest you are starting to see lines when you're not making expression, that would be a good time to start.
All right. Good tip. That's a really good tip.
And that could be whatever age you are. I think when we were talking about your face and you said, you know, the aging face and you feel like you're heavy.
So what I'm conscious about?
Let's start from there.
Let's go there.
Let's go there.
Okay. So I've definitely noticed my lips are thinning. And so, you know, and when you put your lipstick, it doesn't go on the same way. That's, I say, a minor complaint, but I'm noticing it more and more. And you look to we talked about genetics, I look to my elders and I can see where it's going, and it's a thinning. But the thing that really, really bothers me and feels like I'm losing that Beatrice that I know and love is the marionettes right here. That's what they're called, right?
Yeah.
It's right here.
These little lines down the corners of the mouth.
So
these will be the nasolabial folds, or the smile lines, as everybody calls them. And then these are the marionettes down here.
Yeah. So what can we do there?
So the big difference, and this is I think where people shy away from and get nervous really with Botox and filler too, is some people will go, okay, Botox, no problem. I've seen it in movies and in magazines and people talk about it. They're much more curious about it and open to trying it. Filler, when I say filler, people run for the hills.
It sounds scary.
It sounds
Even the
horrifying.
word, like I think filler is, I can imagine a construction worker with those,
like
what are the silicone guns?
Yeah, the caulking gun.
The caulking around my window. Yes, that's what it feels like.
And then you'll see crazy, like even me as a practitioner in this industry, some of the things that I'll see on Instagram from other practitioners looks brutal, to put it simply, right? Some of it looks like a butcher shop. It's really bloody. There's so much trauma, so much swelling.
Yeah.
So the one thing I'll say before anything is our industry is like any other, right? Whether you look at physicians or makeup artists or painters or hairstylists, everybody can buy the same ingredients, right? If I can go to my barber, anybody can get clippers and scissors and a nice chair and a decent space to work out of if they have some money. But the haircut will be a completely different product with every person, with all of the same tools involved. And aesthetics is the exact same way, right? I'll give one person a vial of Botox and a couple of syringes. They'll give you a completely different result than the next person next door. So that's the really, really important thing to consider.
We should tell everyone what filler is. Not everybody knows what filler is.
Okay, so Botox,
let's just talk about that. Yeah.
Botox is botulinum toxin. It's basically a bacteria that we get out of the dirt in the ground.
Which it's the toxin that bacteria produces, just to be
yes. So it's more of like a protein. Let's call it that. So you have different brands that are Health Canada approved, but they're all the basic molecule of botulinum toxin, which does what we talked about earlier, right? Stops the signal from getting in the muscle, telling that muscle to contract. So that's the anti-wrinkle medication. Anti-wrinkle medication won't do anything for areas where there's been volume loss.
Okay.
So the big three things that happen with aging is bone resorption, right? You'll notice cheekbones won't be as high, jaw lines won't be as defined. What happens is that bone starts to shrink and resorb as our skull ages and gets smaller.
And does that just the aging process period, or hormones as well,
Both.
like the estrogen drop for women?
Diet, exercise, right? You know, if your doctor gives you sort of a regimen to follow if you have osteoporosis or arthritis, almost all of it, I would say that's most beneficial, is going to be exercise.
Weight
and not just regular exercise. Don't run, canoeing, strength training, resistance training, right? That's the stuff that's going to build up the muscle mass. It's going to build up bone mass, bone density. So not even just running on your Peloton. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That'll be even worse for people that have joint issues and arthritis and issues. So it's really specifically building muscle. Muscle is longevity. That's what a lot of people don't consider, right? They go, I run all the time, I'm in shape. I'm like, okay, your cardiovascular endurance is super, but you're also probably not eating enough, and you're probably burning away more muscle, which is also negatively impacting how your bones are responding.
We're going to have to talk more about that on another episode, because we could
so
spend
much,
hours on that.
And this is why it's a lifestyle thing.
It's a whole
right?
lifestyle. So the Botox cannot address loss of volume.
Yeah. So anytime you see augmenting, contouring, filling, right, lips, chins, cheeks, jawlines, that's going to be filler. And filler is just hyaluronic acid. And I'm sure at this point most people have heard of hyaluronic acid. It's essentially a sugar molecule that pulls in water.
Great way to define it.
That's all it does.
Yeah.
Right.
And it can come in different sizes, and that matters. Want to
Very
talk
much
about
so.
that? Yeah.
Right. So in filler and the aesthetics world, they talk about a G prime, right? Which is essentially how much hyaluronic acid is in the filler. But filler isn't the same across the board. They're all hyaluronic acid, which is the most important thing, but they come on a spectrum of density.
Yes.
Right.
Low molecular weight.
Low molecular weight, high molecular weight, thin, watery product, dense, thick gel, and everything in between, right? So let's say for what you were telling me about your marionette lines and your nasolabial folds, there's different ways to address that.
Okay, so how would we do it?
So on top of the bone resorption that happens with aging and hormones and lifestyle and sun damage and diet and all of those things, the other big two components for aging is fat pads and skin quality. And then muscle tossed in there too, right? So the face is made up of these little fat compartments, right? And all these fat compartments, when we're young, they're tight and they're high up and they're close together. And that's why the average, 15, 20-year-old has very firm skin, high cheekbones, again, genetically different. As we age, life, sun, sleep, gravity, these fat pads start to separate and they start to fall. So we start to notice that little jowling here, right? Cheeks don't sit where they used to. Those lines look more pronounced. And typically people that have fuller cheeks will look more youthful as they age, but their smile lines will be more prominent.
That's what I feel with me. I have naturally very, I would say,
you have fantastic cheekbones. But that's why your complaints are here.
And that's what I notice, yeah.
And then I tell people, what would you rather have, right? If you didn't have these incredible cheekbones, you wouldn't have the same depth and prominence of these nasolabial folds and the marionette lines, but you also wouldn't look as young as you do for as long as you do. So when it comes to filler, these are the different areas and levels that I play with, right? My big thing will be the bone resorption, which is structural, right? Maybe it sounds a little morbid when I say it this way, but we're essentially just skin that hangs off of bones. That's all it is, right? It's skin and muscle that hangs off of your skeleton. So when it comes to structural things, like I want more model-esque defined cheekbones or fuller volume in the mid-face, then I would use a very, very thick, dense filler, a thick product, and I would go right down to the bone. So my goal would be to mimic bone structure. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds horrifying, but bone is very strong, right? There's no needle in the world that I can use that can damage your bone. If anything, the bone always dulls my needles.
Okay.
But filler has all the cool things in technology, the way that it's formulated, like it'll be mixed with numbing agents and all kind of stuff. Techniques, dexterity with the hands that make it a very, very...
So it doesn't have to be this
It
horrific
doesn't have to be this horrific, grotesque, terrifying experience in the right hands. And it normally isn't, right? So thick, dense filler, I like to use to mimic bone structure. So all that resorption that happens with aging, I don't even like to say replace, I like to say restore. So this is where people start to look different, right? If for every decade of life, let's say you did everything right. You wore your sunscreen your whole life. You didn't go out into the sun. You ate well. You hydrated. You slept. You didn't sleep on your face.
I'd love to meet her or
Me too.
him.
Anybody. That's impossible. That person doesn't exist. If you did all of these things your whole life, you would still lose volume at a rate of 1 syringe per decade.
Okay.
So every milliliter of filler will come in 1 syringe of 1 cc, 1 milliliter, which is about 1/4 of a teaspoon or 1/5 of a teaspoon. So not a ton. So the average 40, 50-year-old can already, just to restore volume they've lost naturally with life, if everything was done properly, could use 4 or 5 syringes in the right place just to restore where they were in their 20s or their teens.
Okay, and then frequency. So let's say you do that.
Yeah.
That's not how long can that last?
It doesn't last forever, but the nice thing with hyaluronic acid is some people find this a nice thing, some people don't like it. So your body will naturally metabolize it. So hyaluronic acid is something that's native to your body. It's innate. Our bodies are full of hyaluronic acid. It'll lubricate your joints, your eyes, and a million different processes. So what we're using, just like Botox, is a completely natural substance. And the beautiful thing about it is your body will metabolize it. So
it's not permanent. That's a good thing.
It's not permanent, but as we start to layer that filler, depending on where we put it, so let's say we're doing the cheekbones, the more layers of hyaluronic acid filler we create, the harder it is for the body to break it all down. So eventually, at a certain point, it becomes semi-permanent. And now this, to me, is the most obvious when you see girls that have had their, or men too nowadays, that have had their lips done multiple times, multiple syringes, and they've reached capacity in their lips. It's like a balloon, right? If I give you a balloon and I say, fill this up, and you fill it to as much air as it can hold, and I say, okay, make this balloon bigger, more air is just gonna pop it.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the lips, right? When the lips have reached the point where the flesh and tissue cannot hold any more water and volume, it'll start to move outside of the lips. And then we see that puffy, mustachy, ducky look that everybody knows as duck lips.
Right.
And more filler will only contribute to that problem. It won't make their lips bigger, it'll just make the issue more prominent. Some people seem to be okay with this. I think it looks horrible. I don't think it looks natural. I don't think it's flattering on anybody. But even worse, you start to lose that distinguishing line between different features of the face, right? I don't think the goal should be to chase every line, wrinkle, and crease, right? There's a reason cheeks are the cheeks, chin is the chin, jaw is the jaw, and you need to see separation between all of them. But for you specifically, I would do a combination of things. Or not for you specifically, anybody with that same concern, right? I would do deep injections of filler down on the bone just to create that pop and that volume where the skull has receded a little bit, like the plate behind the nose here. So that would help to push the skin up from the skeleton up into those tissues. And then you get softer fillers, that whole range that we can play with in different levels of the skin and different depths.
So it really is an art.
It really is an art.
It's science, and you understand anatomy.
There's so much that goes into it for a nice look at the end that lasts and is free of consequence that people don't understand, right?
Well, thank you for, I hope that this at least educates people a little bit more, because we just see the end results or those really quick, it was so fast, like the quick reels and the quick TikToks, and you don't really understand.
Exactly. So social media makes it very sexy because, I mean, let's be real, it's still a business and everybody wants to sell more, but it's flesh, tissue, some of it is unpredictable, right? There's a healing period. You just always see the airbrushed, photoshopped, filtered, perfect lighting with an amazing camera, image that everybody takes afterwards, but it's not real life.
It's not real life. And on that note, we're going to dial it right back because we've just did a deep dive on medical aesthetics or cosmetic aesthetics. Now, I'm going to ask you a more philosophical question, perhaps, which is, what makes you feel beautiful? And I'm using the word beautiful, even though you identify as male. No matter
Beauty
what
is
you
beauty.
identify
Yeah.
as, beauty applies. I think there's beauty in aging. But I
Agreed.
want to know, what makes you feel beautiful?
There's a whole cascade of things, I would say. I think it's like that for all of us, right? If you have, for parents especially, right? You've been up all night with kids, you haven't
You
slept. I have three
Three
kids.
great
Yeah.
kids, yeah.
If you wake up tired and you're hungry and you're not rested and you haven't had water and you haven't had an opportunity to do anything for yourself, you're not going to feel your best. You can dress it up as much as you want, right? You could put on your favorite outfit. You could put on all the clothes that you know normally make you feel powerful or whatever it is. And inside, that's not it, right? So that really tells me that a lot of what we're looking for comes from here first. For me to really feel at my best, there's certain things that I need in my life. I know I need to move my body. I need physical movement. And I think this is everybody. No matter how much people try to convince themselves that this isn't the case, historically, genetically, this is what we're made to do. We all need a purpose. We all need to move, right?
I love purpose.
That's the big thing.
That's a big one.
So this is a very, very philosophical question because there's so much that goes into it. I spent years and years of my life not feeling beautiful or handsome, whatever it was, because certain things in my life didn't align, right? I wasn't happy where I was financially. I wasn't happy with what I looked at or what I saw when I looked in the mirror. I wasn't happy with family dynamics. I wasn't happy with my work situation. So all of those things are gonna plant little seeds in your brain and they're gonna affect your confidence. And anything that affects your confidence is gonna affect the way you feel, right? So this question is more philosophical, I think, than you even intended when you posed this question. But I'll give you an example. You know, this summer I went on vacation with my family, Caribbean vacation, nice getaway, you know, spent a week recharging the batteries, not thinking about work, spending time with my kids. Came back, my best friend was getting married. So you come back after a week of running up and down the beach, salt water in your sinuses and, you know, resetting your whole body, nice tan, good haircut, fresh suit on. That's when I felt really good, right? February, January in Canada, there's no sun. It's gloomy outside. Everybody's, you know, back to the rat race of life, going to work. Kids are back in school. It's dark when you wake up. It's dark when you get home. It's cold. You need 15 million layers to go anywhere, right? It's not the most optimistic time. It's not the most happy time. And this is also time where people get a lot of anxiety, right? We're always looking towards the next best thing. So I'd say mindset is the one thing that's going to change everything, right? Even look at the sort of pandemic we're dealing with now with depression and anxiety, right? There's one thing I read years ago, and it was depression is when you can't let go of what's behind you. Anxiety is if you can't let go of what's going to happen in front of you.
So live in the moment, maybe?
Live in the moment.
Yeah.
Try to keep things one day at a time. But there's so many different components to that, right? Not everybody's moment is a pleasant one. They can't wait to get out of that moment and into the next one. So I think it's a journey, right? I spend my whole life, and I continue to do so, where I make changes that I think benefit me. And I think that's where you have to be really intuitive and self-reflective and learn what works for you and doesn't work for you. And it goes right back to that lifestyle thing, right? This stuff is great for looking better by society standards, but it's more important that people are doing what makes them feel better. So when I have clients that sit down in my chair and they go, "What do you think I should do?" I go, "You're not here for me, right? You didn't come here because you wanted to meet me. You came here because you had a concern that maybe you can't verbalize, maybe you don't know exactly what it is, but when you look in the mirror, let's start there.
And that's
Right?
a great thing, is be true to yourself, know yourself, don't look to others, maybe, right? For
And it's
approval.
always tough treating the younger, early 20s generation, because all of their concerns come from, I saw this one girl, or I follow this one girl on Instagram, or this and this person. I want to look like that and I want to do this. I'm like, but I can't bring myself to treat you. And that's not a good enough reason, because you're never going to be happy if that's what you're chasing. Right?
So I think that's maybe how we can end this session, is as hard as it is, because it is hard to not look all around you, is try to focus on.
It sounds cheesy, right? Like it sounds so cheesy and cliche when you say it.
It's true.
But there's nothing truer.
There's nothing truer. Well, Sasha, I really enjoyed our conversation
Me too.
today.
I had an amazing time. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We talked about protecting our skin from UVA and UVB rays with Sasha. That is truly one of the most important things we can do. So today I'm going to talk about my top 2 sunscreens. The first one is the Supergoop Glow Screen SPF 40. It's a game changer, especially if you care about white cast. This does not have any. It's not greasy. And on top of it, it gives you this glow. I'm going to put some on my arm because I'm full of makeup. But it leaves you almost like with a highlighter finish. And if you have sensitive skin, I have another one for you. And this one I like using on my body. It's Antelios Mineral SPF 50. They're both in a similar price range, under $50. I love the Antelios for the body. Similar thing, it's light, fluid, no white cast. I use it all over the body. Zero irritation. It's actually really comfortable. Some sunscreens you feel like you're suffocating. There you have it. Antelios for the body, my go-to, and Supergoop for that glow highlighted look.